The strategic sponsors of the 7th International ASEAN Congress are the Marshal's Office of the Kujawsko-Pomorskie Voivodeship, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education as part of the Excellent Science Program and the city of Torun. The event is held under the patronage of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. The patrons of the Congress are also Marshal of the Kujawsko-Pomorskie Voivodeship Piotr Całbecki, Kujawsko-Pomorskie Voivod Mikołaj Bogdanowicz, Mayor of the city of Torun Michał Zalewski, and Rector of the Nicolaus Copernicus University in Torun Professor Andrzej Sokala. In the panel entitled Education During a Global Pandemic will take part the following scientists: Professor Precious Yamaguchi from Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon, with a lecture entitled Teaching Fashion and Communication During a Global Pandemic. Professor Vedpal Singh from Maharshi Dayanand University in Rohtak, India. Title of lecture: Impact of COVID-19 on Legal Education and Legal Profession, Jimples from India. Mr. Andre Lawrence Feria from University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Professor Dariusz Kubinowski from University of Szczecin, who is going to deliver his presentation in Polish. My lecture is entitled Characteristic Feature of Higher Education in Poland and South Korea during the COVID-19 pandemic. I will present some conclusions from joint comparative empirical studies which were conducted in June this year at the Silesian University of Technology in Gliwice, Poland, and in Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul, South Korea, on the characteristics of higher education during pandemic. Despite some differences, but also some similarities in the cultural foundation of our education systems, the European, the foundation of which were built by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and the Asian, described by Confucius philosophy. Modern university education in both countries experiences similar interactions as a result of a pandemic and exhibits similar problems. A total of several hundred students from different fields of study were surveyed in both universities and written interviewed by dozens of academics and several non-faculty administrators and colleges. It turned out that academics show similar attitudes towards the imposed distance learning pandemic, apply similar but new methods of e-learning using different e-learning platforms and tools such as Zoom, Big Blue Button, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, Skype in Poland, or WebEx and e-class system in South Korea. We have obtained similar results and conclusions from our research, which can be synthetically formulated as follows in the case of academic studies. The academic teachers said that online education are complementary, not substitutes, because the essence of the university lectures is the questions of students, the answers of lectures, the critical acceptance and reasoning of both sides, and re-questioning. It can be fulfilled only in a small degree in a class. In a class is the lack of interaction between lecturers and students. Next, the lecturers in South Korea spend almost double time, in Poland triple time, than offline lecture on preparation for distance education, and the elderly lecturers mostly have difficulties in using new tools and systems because of lack of experience or system instability. They found difficulties in evaluation of students by online examination. Lecturers believe that distance classes don't give much satisfaction as face-to-face classes. Although the investigated students said that they are not well satisfied with distant learning comparing to synchronous learning. It is not comfortable for them to communicate and interact with lectures during the class. They consider that the lecture delivery impact on distant learning is much less than one on synchronous learning because of lack of interaction between lecturers and students. They are unsatisfied with the teaching materials provided by teachers as PPT, slides, or video materials because such materials need double or triple more time for their analysis. We can conclude that the academic teacher and students don't show their satisfaction in distance education based on the e-learning platform and e-class system because of technical problems, especially in so-called peak hours in which the servers are overloaded, quality of lectures, and lack of interaction. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, I'm Dr. Precious Yamaguchi from Southern Oregon University. Thank you so much for having me present at your conference today. I'm currently presenting from Ashland, Oregon in the United States. And I wish I could be there at your conference, but hopefully in the future I'll be able to attend an in-person conference with all of you. Today I'm going to be talking about teaching international fashion and communication during a global pandemic. When I returned to my university last March, I was returning from maternity leave, and our spring quarter started in March, right as we were really starting to learn about COVID-19 and businesses were closing down, people were starting to adjust, and overall the feeling was very frightening because people, including myself and including many of our students and faculty, had no idea what this virus was about, how big it was going to grow, and what was just going to happen during that year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it was like to adjust my course, the Communication 460F International Fashion, Textiles, and Communication class. The reason I'm focusing on this class is because it was the most difficult class for me to envision teaching during this time of a global pandemic. During spring quarter, I was teaching other courses such as Communication Across Culture, which is a type of intercultural communication class, and International Communication. These courses, there was a lot of information that I could use that could connect to what was happening in the world during that time, and also being able to talk about topics such as health, organizational communication, media, all of these things, you can talk about them in relationship to a pandemic happening. But I thought, how am I going to teach an international fashion class during such a serious time? And also, all of our assignments that we typically do in this class were in person. I felt that it was almost frivolous to teach such a class, but there was already so many students signed up. It was practically completely full, so I knew that I would have to adjust. And it couldn't be in the same way that it was usually taught because during this time, as businesses were closing down, there were no fashion shows or retail stores open. Everything was in this type of limbo in terms of socializing, but also the economy as well. And so we had our spring quarter was presented through Zoom and online platforms. And like many of you, we used a video chat and different online platforms to facilitate our class so we would not have to be face to face or in person. Having to change this class from something that was really fun and informative and hands-on to something that was, first of all, very online, remote, and also watching the field and industry of fashion changing before our eyes. People were no longer able to go to retail stores. Fashion shows were no longer able to happen in person. There was looting and rioting during this time because of different protests that were happening. So teaching this class, I had to completely change a lot of the material that I was using, as well as the assignments. And every day in our class, a big topic of discussion was what is happening to the fashion industry. We were able to see different long time, very large historical type of businesses closing down, declaring bankruptcy, not being able to sell their products, and major changes within the fashion industry. We also, as I mentioned, saw a lot of looting and rioting happening here in the United States in relationship to the Black Lives Matter movement and events, but also different types of rioting and protesting, and just seeing a lot of people break into stores and steal luxury goods. So every week, no matter what kind of preparations I made the week in advance, there was always something new that was happening. We still did talk about some of the foundational ideas of fashion, some of the historical and cultural topics and individuals that we were supposed to know. But this class, no matter how much I prepared for it, each week was very, very different based upon the current events. One of the things that I felt was the most empowering for students during this unpredictable time of having online classes and having being part of a global pandemic, having to stay at home away from their families and in their dorms and apartments, and also having to worry about their finances. One of the things that I did find that was empowering to the students was their ability to create content within the context of which we were existing. So not feeling that we were just limited to Zoom and online classes, but still being able to have some creative outlets to make different types of projects. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. We still focused on the resources I could provide, foundational information, different type of articles, videos, current events, discussing current events, supplying different types of resources and having guest speakers, checking in with students and having narratives and talking about our community. For students, it was empowering for them to be able to create content, have assignments that respond to what was happening, talk about their identities, their narratives, and also still showcase their work and not feel like they are invisible or just lost within this type of online video chat grid. We still try to look inward and outward, and really in every class, I try to make it so students feel that they are seen, heard, and visible, and look at themselves in different ways and be able to express themselves. So I was very happy that one of our students talked about how masks were part of her Japanese culture even before coming to the US. And then I had a guest speaker who, even though he couldn't Zoom with us in real time, I interviewed him and posted it on our online site, and he talked about how his creation of himself in terms of dress was neither trans nor there is actually no word for it, because he felt that he dressed in ways that were both feminine and masculine, but incorporated his facial hair, incorporated different masculine sides of himself, but with feminine qualities. So just being able to have some guest speakers that were able to look inward and also bring the students into their creation of themselves, and have students as well talk about their identities. Our assignments ended up becoming really interesting because there is one assignment that I always have in the beginning of the year, which is to do a fashion photo shoot that responds to the previous limitations represented in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality. So in our class, we look at some articles and chapters that talk about the ways that historically certain types of body types, genders, people of certain socioeconomics, races, and ethnicities are represented in fashion. And other people of marginalized identities are not always represented in the most positive ways or just even visible. So students respond to that and create their own type of fashion photo shoots. And it was really interesting to see that students were able to work on this project by themselves and also represent their own identities and confront some of the stereotypes that have been previously made in other types of fashion photo shoots. And usually this is a group project where students work in groups, but this project, instead, they worked on it by themselves and still got themselves outside of the house with protective types of things such as masks and working by themselves, social distancing. So they had some really great projects, as you can see. Also, I created content as well. We talked a little bit about YouTube videos and the way that YouTube and certain online platforms has created visibility for people that you typically didn't see in fashion, such as like a Japanese American, like 5'2", mid-30s professor. So that's not something that you typically see in fashion or YouTube, but I created a makeup tutorial at the bottom, as you can see, where I was completely barefaced and not only put on makeup, but also talked about some of the cultural context of YouTube videos and how it's brought about visibility for different identities. And I think the students thought it was fun to see their professor at home with no makeup, putting on makeup, and also giving a lecture as well. So I really tried to have fun with it as much as I possibly can, but still citing articles, giving students the different types of resources that talk about fashion and identity. Lastly, it's hard during a global pandemic of uncertainty and having to stay at home and all of the different things that were happening. It's hard to be a college student during this time. So I did my best to try and find small but significant wins for us. And one of those things was having students create their different assignments, being able to create a community, and also let them know that you are visible. And we were very fortunate to be featured on our university president's blog. She came to visit our class because she was very interested in it and heard positive things. And then also, we were featured on the front page. This is a photo, the front page of our regional newspaper. And the newspaper article talked about how our class was confronting this pandemic, talking about how masks had now become a part of fashion, and also just using our everyday current events to be able to respond to the things that were happening, to the bankruptcy of different companies closing down, to people having to stay at home, the looting and rioting of different luxury brand stores, and just the way that we were able to incorporate all that was happening within our class through our assignments and through our discussion. So I hope this gives us a bit of encouragement to find creative ways to have students know that they're visible and find creative ways to respond to what's happening in the world, whatever field or whatever topic that we are addressing in our course. So I initially felt that this class would be insignificant due to its focus on fashion, but in reality, we were able to see the major changes that were happening in companies through having guest speakers come talk to us about what was happening in their company or the bankruptcy or the different hardships that they were having, as well as different people who talked about their fashion identity, their cultural identity, and then also having the students represent themselves in creative ways, do creative projects that responded to the things that were happening in the world. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I wish you all the best.
Respected members of the organizing committee, speakers from various parts of the globe, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Dr. Vedpal Singh Deswal from Faculty of Law, Maharshi Dhanand University, Rohtak, Haryana. I would like to speak on the topic of impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on legal education vis-a-vis legal profession, glimpses from India. Friends, as we know that knowledge empowers. What does it mean? Means to eradicate the ignorance from the minds of the people and to create the system in such a way that the budding lawyers, they come to know what is true, what is false, how to analyze, and how to carry out a study method during their course of curriculum. Friends, on 22nd March 2020, everything came to a halt when Sri Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, declared that tomorrow onward there would be a lockdown, complete lockdown. Everything came to a halt. All those aeroplanes who used to fly high in the sky, they came on their taxi tracks, trains, they are on their tracks, buses, in the bus stands, students at their home or their hostels, and teachers, they remained in their houses. And friends, it was a great problem. We were not aware that up to when this lockdown will take place. For how many days we have to remain in our home throughout the day and night. Complete ban on our movements. As a teacher of law, I learned that what is act of God. So many students, they learned that this is nature, how the things takes place, how the act of God takes place. Friends, now coming to the topic that during COVID-19, what was the status of legal education vis-a-vis legal profession in India? More than 2 months and 20 days passed to starting place from this new session, which began on 7th of the January 2020 and which came to a halt on 23rd March 2020. Friends, as a method of traditional mode of teaching, students and teachers come to close in their room, teaching room, which is allocated by the faculty. We used to discuss the syllabi, subject matters, and we used to go smoothly. But it became a halt to the traditional mode of the learning, and we switched on to the online mode. What is online mode? By sitting at our homes, we are able to convey the message, we are able to convey the debates, we are able to convey the study material of the teaching. We conveyed our lectures by means of PPT. We took our classes on various platforms, Google Meet, WebEx, Zoom, etc. But you will be surprised to know, students were not happy. They used to say, "Sir, when will you call us in the department?" But we said that, friends, health is wealth. What does it mean? It proved here that maintaining the distance of 6 feet, putting the mask on the mouth, and remaining at home, cannot move from home except to few people who used to serve on essential services, who used to move to their service centers. So classes took place by means of these e-platforms. We learnt a new lesson, that how to teach through various modes of online teaching. In my university also, we took an initiative of familiarization course for the teachers. 7-day training program was conducted for the teachers. Teachers learnt how to make use of the Google Meet to connect the students, how to send the assignments, how to examine by means of multiple choice questions, and how to take the examination. Friends, because there was a pandemic in between the semester course, examinations were still left. Now, in the month of June and July, we prepared well to conduct the examinations, but because of increasing the cases of COVID-19, corona cases, the authorities thought that why not to conduct the examination by means of duplex mode. Duplex mode means online as well as offline. The Ministry of Health, Welfare Department, Ministry of Education, they decided that the examination for terminal students should take place. The university prepared very well. We asked for the option from the students whether they shall be appearing through online mode or they shall be able to come to the department. But friends, as a matter of self-experience, I observed that all those persons who could not have the transport facility at their home, they stayed at their home. They opted for the online mode of examination. And as you may know that India is a very large country. Various disparities are there. Some people are rich, some are poor. Some poor students, they were not in possession of smartphones. They made a request to the university authorities that kindly provide us smartphones so that they can be the part of the system of online teaching. My university is an excellent in this regard. Some arrangement was made and the students, they got the facility to learn at their home. Classes took place very smoothly, still going on. Examination took place very smoothly. Nowadays, the results are being declared by the university. So in terms of education, we have accepted that challenge, and up to 90% that challenge has turned into reality. Classes are going on very smoothly. Absolutely, there is no problem, no disturbance. Some problems were there with respect to internet facility, speed of internet, connectivity, applications of various softwares, downloading of various softwares. But slowly and gradually, the students came to know, they exchanged their views with their friends, and it was formed that a traditional mode of teaching and learning took place through online mode. Friends, this was about legal education, but what about legal profession? After USC, India has got the number of advocates in a large capacity. They used to earn their livelihood on account of fighting the rights of the victims, that is petitioners and respondents, in the court of law. the entire justice delivery system came to a halt. After 2 months, some relaxation was given. Video conferences took place, that to be very important matters. And most of the advocates, they could not earn their livelihood. There was a huge loss of financial in terms of advocate professional. The advocates who used to be in their uniform, they had been their home. Everything came to a halt. Now the 8 months have passed. Slowly and gradually, the courts are starting opening, and we are feeling that a new ray of hope is taking place. Students have just passed their terminal examinations. They shall be enrolling themselves for the license of advocate. They will enroll themselves for the practitioner advocate with the State Bar Council. Friends, in most parts of the globe, the effects have taken place at a large scale. Education is not an exception to this. As I said, that transport system, the other modes of livelihood, they came to a halt, and slowly and gradually the economy of the states, they went down in minus, I mean to say. Rather, you can say that it was a black piece in the lives of the people. We are working hard to improve the system. We are advising our students how to contain the pandemic, how to maintain the health of themselves as well as their parents, how to be a true citizen in this pandemic by following the policies framed by the government of India, how to serve in these challenging times. So many questions took place. So many people, they got setback in terms of financial losses. The government extended its hands for their upliftment. Nobody slept hungry. It was a kind of human approach in all sectors of the life. But India is a very large country, and some lacunas remain always. So I can say that in terms of education, loss has not taken place. All those losses of traditional mode of teaching, it was repaired by means of online classes. Some losses are there with respect to students who were not having these smartphones. Ultimately, the university made the arrangements and they were helped. So at the last, I would conclude by saying the proverb of Herbert Spencer: no one is happy till all are happy. No one is healthy till all are healthy. No one is educated till all are educated. He wanted to convey a message that the entire society is a global village. We must extend our hands to help the nearers and dearers across the nations. We must share the views in such a way that it should be beneficial to the humankind. So with these words, I express my gratitude to the organizers and to my dear friends, Dr. Michael Dehel. So I thank you, each one of you, for patient hearing. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Good day, everyone. I am Andre Lorenz B. Feria from the University of the Philippines. I am currently a non-degree graduate student at the Department of Musicology, College of Music, and an academic coordinator and consultant. Today, I will be speaking about edukasyon sa gitna ng pandemya, a brief narrative assessment of the Philippine education system during the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the most highlighted issues during this pandemic was education. Across the globe, different countries were posed with the problem of how to continue with the education programs in the middle of a global pandemic. The Philippine education system saw an unprecedented change in the fundamental form of instruction when the pandemic hit, from the traditional face-to-face classroom setting and instruction to the shift in online or remote learning using synchronous or real-time and asynchronous non-real-time methods. There have been countless discussions and arguments on whether the current Philippine educational system is ready for the remote or distance learning. Issues surrounding accessibility and inclusivity became the central focus on the implementation of the new guidelines for learning. Now with this, the Department of Education, or DepEd, and the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, mandated schools to employ ways to ensure that all students of different learning capabilities are catered to and that no student will be left behind. Hence, we often hear the term blended learning, as in education delivered through a mix of channels, and the internet is just one of them. Now, remote learning, as defined by these educational institutions, are guided independent learning. So basically, students will learn independently but will still be guided by professors or instructors. These government institutions, however, try to paint the situation as under control. But does it realistically reflect the sentiments of the people on ground, like the teachers, students, parents? Is the Philippines really prepared for remote or distance learning? In an August 24 statement released by the UP Office of the Student Regent, which is the University of the Philippines' highest student body representative, it called for the postponement of classes in the university, demanding accountability to ensure the safe, free, accessible, and quality education among its constituents in all 21 campuses. It cites, based on UP data alone, at least 5,600 students are expected to not be able to keep up with remote learning. Surveys distributed and conducted for students across the UP system shows that the system-wide average of the number of respondents who are not ready for remote learning in relation to various concerns does not fall below the 50% line. Not yet included here are those who we cannot even reach due to the location and connection issues. So in short, majority of the students have been firm in expressing that we are currently not confident enough to say that UP can pursue a remote learning system without leaving any student behind. Now, this statement comes after students raised grievances on accessibility to remote or distance learning, citing difficulty in connecting and accessing fast, reliable, and stable internet connection, which is arguably the most significant factor in the setting of an effective online learning. In a 2019 survey by the Speed Test Global Index, the Philippines ranked 103rd among 139 surveyed countries, which makes the country's internet speed below the global average. This poses a critical problem for both teachers and students for the very obvious reason that unstable internet connection would hinder an effective and efficient learning environment. And true enough, just a few days after classes were opened, a handful of internet-related problems were experienced by both students and teachers alike. Following this, calls for academic freeze among different colleges and universities were echoed as a protest to the administration's disregard for students' and teachers' concerns and grievances. Social media platforms were flooded with the hashtag #AcademicFreezeNow to signify the growing movement of students and teachers alike who call for the suspension of classes pushing for the academic year to start in early 2021 instead. Another pressing issue for teachers was the limited amount of time and resources to prepare for the 180-degree shift of traditional classroom setting into online learning. Teachers were required to make course packs to supplement the remote or distance learning. So what exactly can be found in these course packs? 1, a course guide with the detailed syllabus of the course. 2, with the different learning resources like readings, multimedia resources, video lectures, and other content resources. 3, activity guides, and lastly, assignment guides. Now, these course packs are prepared in different formats. 1, it can be as online materials uploaded to the course site, like one we have in UP, the University Virtual Learning Environment, or the UVLE, or 2, as digital files in a flash drive or USB, or as printed materials to be sent via couriers. Now, as someone who was involved in first-hand creation of learning modules and materials in preparation for the shifting during this pandemic, I could personally say that the challenges do not get any better. You can become more efficient in creating and organizing, but the issues remain the same. And that's only the first half of the struggle. Teaching remotely is another challenge the teachers must conquer successfully to be able to deliver the lessons effectively. The University of the Philippines officially uses Zoom as its main program or application for online classes. Now, teachers and students are given access to the Pro accounts using their official UP mail address. This is a welcome development as it relieves us, stakeholders, of the burden of paying for these services ourselves. Meanwhile, on the other hand, as a music student myself, the challenges are not different, albeit relatively more difficult considering that the fundamental method to music as an academic discipline is physical practice and communal music making. Take for example my program, Music Education. As future classroom teachers and educators, we are tasked to meet with students on a weekly basis as part of our practicum. Additionally, our thesis, which is called a special project, requires us to go to communities and build music programs that would normally require students to gather and perform music together. Now you can imagine how the new guidelines have drastically changed the way in which these classes are to be delivered. Likewise, very much is the same and true for other programs and courses that require students to be heavily and physically involved as part of their learning process. Some of these programs are in education, sports science, community development, and theater, to name a few. In these trying times, our mental health should be considered just as much. For teachers, the line between the professional and personal has been blurred to almost non-existence. For students, the stark social inequality is highlighted in the privileges or the lack thereof, as manifested in 1, the fast and stable internet connection for the privileged versus the slow and unstable internet connection for the underprivileged. The high-end gadgets and devices for the privileged versus the cheap and underperforming gadgets for the underprivileged. The dedicated learning spaces for the privileged versus the communal spaces for the underprivileged, and so much more other factors that may highlight the students' insecurities among their peers. Additionally, the burden of continuous workload adds more stress to both the teachers and students, which collectively eventually leads to burnout. It has only been more than a month into the academic year, and teachers and students are already calling for breaks to catch up on their assigned works and give space for their mental health. In just the span of 3 months, the Philippines has lost 3 great young scholars to suicide. Unfortunately, the common denominator, the challenges brought upon by remote learning. The first one, a 19-year-old male student who couldn't afford the cost of purchasing load or internet fees to participate in online classes. The next one is a 21-year-old male who had to stop school because he couldn't enroll and support his online classes. And just very recently, a 21-year-old female who had a hard time during her online classes because of poor service, signal, and internet connection. The irony of it all is that the Philippine Education Secretary herself claimed to have won victory over these issues surrounding the pandemic, all the while the reality speaks otherwise. Now, in conclusion, Given the poor response of the Philippine government to this pandemic, there isn't too much expectations of the education sector being better in the next few months. While our neighboring countries like Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore, and other South Asian countries are already back to face-to-face classes, the Philippines has yet a long way to go in ensuring that students can safely go back to physical classes. Now, as for the moment, the current solutions to these persisting issues leave much to be desired, all while the challenge to deliver free, accessible, and quality education through remote or distance learning remains. Thank you.
Dzień dobry, dobry wieczór. Nazywam się Dariusz Kubinowski, jestem profesorem nauk społecznych. Pracuję aktualnie w Uniwersytecie Szczecińskim. Bardzo dziękuję za zaproszenie do udziału w tym panelu z głosem dyskusji na temat szkolnictwa wyższego i nauki w czasach pandemii. Na wstępie chcę też podziękować i pogratulować panu doktorowi Adamowi Marszałkowi idei i kontynuacji rozwoju Kongresu Azjatyckiego, również w tych czasach trudnych dzisiaj, kiedy trzeba sprostać różnym wyzwaniom związanym z pandemią. Ale też chcę podkreślić jego istotne dokonania, wkład w zakresie wspierania rozwoju nauki i szkolnictwa wyższego w Polsce poprzez prowadzenie wydawnictwa, poprzez wydawanie monografii, czasopism, organizowanie konferencji i ogólnie poprzez relacje z nami, z naszym środowiskiem, bardzo pozytywne i wspierające. Moje wystąpienie, mój głos w dyskusji zatytułowałem 10 konstruktywnych skutków pandemii dla szkolnictwa wyższego i nauki, z koncentracją na sytuacji w Polsce. To może wydać się kontrowersyjne, dlatego że mówić będę o skutkach konstruktywnych pandemii, ale nie należę do grupy osób, które uważają, że ten dramat pandemii, zapaść cywilizacyjna, bo tak trzeba to podkreślić, nad którą nie zapanowaliśmy jako ludzkość na razie, jest czymś pozytywnym, wręcz odwrotnie. Doświadczam tego jako nauczyciel akademicki, jako członek rodziny, jako członek społeczności lokalnej. To wszystko należy oceniać bardzo negatywnie. To, co dotyczy rozwoju pandemii, ona jest globalna, trudno na nią zapanować, trudno jednoznacznie łączyć to z jakimiś lokalnymi kontekstami politycznymi, a jednocześnie wydaje się, że stanowi ona określone wyzwanie, pewien wstrząs dla ludzkości, nad którym można już troszeczkę próbować pochylać się analitycznie, naukowo po tych przeszło półrocznych doświadczeniach. I takie doświadczenia rzeczywiście zgromadziłem również ja poprzez intensywne zaangażowanie w szkolnictwo wyższe i uprawianie nauki w Polsce i poza Polską. A zatem prosiłbym nie odbierać tego jako pochwały pandemii, tylko bardziej jako pewnego zagajenia do dyskusji wokół tego, jak moglibyśmy wykorzystać to doświadczenie na przyszłość. A wydaje mi się, że jest wiele konstruktywnych takich lekcji z tego wynikających. Podzieliłem to na 10 takich punktów, tak jak powiedziałem na wstępie. I pierwsza kwestia to podejście nauczycieli akademickich do kształcenia zdalnego. No tutaj trzeba samokrytycznie stwierdzić, w imieniu całego środowiska to mówię, że myśmy jako nauczyciele akademicy musieli rzeczywiście w przyspieszonym tempie nadrobić swoje zaległości, nauczyć się wielu nowych technologii, nowych aplikacji, nowych form komunikacji. To wszystko wzmocniło naszą wiedzę, nasze umiejętności, nasze postawy, a także pozwala nam chyba lepiej rozumieć współczesny świat. Studenci nasi znacznie lepiej tutaj się odnaleźli i wiele nas nauczyli, za co im bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. I to jest chyba bardzo podstawowe wyzwanie dla wszystkich nauczycieli akademickich, uczonych, wszystkich nauczycieli, właśnie, ażeby nie obawiać się technologii, ażeby próbować, niezależnie od różnych uwarunkowań osobistych, pokonać pewne trudności, dlatego że jest to element naszej współczesności i przyszłości. Druga sprawa to, z tego wynikająca, to bardzo rozwinęła się metodyka kształcenia online. A zatem pojawiły się opracowania, pojawiły się doświadczenia, pojawiły się pomoce, pojawiły się różne formy współpracy pomiędzy różnymi podmiotami, właśnie ukierunkowane na wsparcie nauczycieli, studentów, uczniów, w tym, żeby ta komunikacja edukacyjna, zdalna, online była bardziej efektywna i nowoczesna. Myślę, że to też będzie trend rozwojowy. Trzecia kwestia to zauważyłem, że szkoły niepubliczne w Polsce znacznie lepiej, szybciej zareagowały na te zmiany, właśnie na sytuację pandemii. W Polsce mamy generalnie szkolnictwo publiczne, państwowe dla studentów, którzy tutaj studiują, stacjonarnie bezpłatne w podstawowym zakresie, a także szkoły niepubliczne. I wydaje mi się, że wiele właśnie szkoły publiczne mogą się nauczyć od tych menedżerów, tych nauczycieli, władz, studentów szkół niepublicznych, jak elastycznie, szybko, natychmiast dostosowywać się do nowej sytuacji. Kolejny, czwarty punkt to dominującym, wydaje mi się, w przyszłości będzie, bo na pewno obecnie, ale w przyszłości model hybrydowy, jeśli chodzi o edukację. Edukację wyższą, ale myślę, że generalnie edukację. A zatem łączenie wszystkich możliwości, które stwarzają technologie, nowe media, z tym kształceniem bezpośrednim, tradycyjnym w relacjach face to face. To wszystko, niezależnie od rozwoju sytuacji pandemicznej, ile lat to potrwa, tego nie wiemy, stanie się, wydaje mi się, elementem podstawowym, takim stałym relacji międzyludzkich, a także relacji edukacyjnych. Pojawiają się w konsekwencji, piąty punkt tutaj, nowe formy studiów. Już mamy takie propozycje właśnie ze strony szkół niepublicznych, a mianowicie studia wyższe zdalne, czy studia podyplomowe zdalne. No trzeba szybko było reagować. Szkoły niepubliczne też bardziej, wydaje mi się, myślą o tych aspektach ekonomicznych swojego funkcjonowania. Wobec tego pojawiły się właśnie już oferty zaakceptowane przez kandydatów na przykład studiów podyplomowych zdalnych. Pojawia się w konsekwencji eksterytorializacja kształcenia wyższego, czyli porzucenie takiego myślenia, że szkoła wyższa ulokowana w jakimś mieście, ona obejmuje przede wszystkim lokalną czy regionalną społeczność studencką. Tutaj można sobie wyobrazić studentów w Szczecinie, którzy będą pochodzili z różnych części świata i będą brali udział poprzez kształcenie zdalne właśnie w edukacji wyższej. Pojawiają się, szósty punkt, różnego rodzaju oszczędności finansowe i możliwości wydatkowania tych oszczędności na cele faktycznie rozwijające, wspierające działalność naukowo-dydaktyczną. Dlaczego? Dlatego, że nasze koszty na przykład uczestnictwa w konferencjach, wtedy kiedy to były koszty delegacji, przejazdów, noclegów i tak dalej, one bardzo obciążały właśnie ten budżet przeznaczony na naukę, a w tym momencie te środki zostały zwolnione, no bo mamy bądź zakaz, bądź ograniczenia, bądź też sami się ograniczamy w tym uczestnictwie bezpośrednim w konferencjach. To jest tylko jeden przykład. To nie jest też, znowu wracam do początku, jakaś pochwała konferencji online, ale to jest wymóg chwili, a jednocześnie pewna refleksja, jak dużo środków finansowych wydajemy na przejazdy, jak dużo to nas obciąża, jeśli chodzi o budżety, skromne budżety na uprawianie nauki. 7. punkt, to w konsekwencji również pojawiają się oszczędności w budżetach prywatnych. Uczciwie trzeba przyznać, że pracownicy naukowi w Polsce wydają bardzo dużo pieniędzy z środków prywatnych, z budżetów domowych właśnie na ich rozwój, na delegacje, na różne działania, które no, nie są w pełni i satysfakcjonująco refinansowane przez budżety uczelni państwowych czy uczelni niepublicznych. W konsekwencji na przykład musieliśmy ponieść określone znaczne wydatki w tej chwili na zakup nowego sprzętu, na unowocześnienie tego sprzętu. To były wydatki prywatne. A zatem pojawia się tutaj dodatkowy aspekt właśnie myślenia o tym, jak funkcjonuje nauczyciel akademicki w kontekście niskich pensji, w kontekście jego zabezpieczenia finansowego ze strony uczelni, jego prac naukowych itd. Kolejny 8. punkt to nowe formy konferencji, seminariów. One się bardzo rozwinęły w Polsce. Mamy nie tyle zastój, bo to był pewnie początek pandemii, co wręcz eksplozję właśnie seminariów, webinariów, konferencji, kongresów, tak jak ten kongres, właśnie realizowanych online. To pozwala na poszerzenie kręgu osób uczestniczących. Osobiście organizowałem również, współorganizowałem konferencję dotyczącą edukacji w czasach pandemii, właśnie online, w której uczestniczyło blisko 300 osób, bez przemieszczania się, za darmo i debata była bardzo udana. Później materiały były i są nadal opublikowane w internecie. Kolejny 9. punkt to ogromne wyzwanie pustych budynków. 2 dni temu odwiedzałem po raz kolejny budynek mojego uniwersytetu. Puste sale, pozaklejane ławki, krzesła, no przerażający widok. To jest sytuacja globalna, to nie jest tylko sytuacja lokalna, ale jednocześnie pojawia się wyzwanie, jak te pomieszczenia, jak to wszystko przeorganizować, w jaki sposób pracować z tym zasobem materialnym teraz i w przyszłości, bo koszty są ogromne utrzymania, a jednocześnie być może wskazuje to nam nową drogę do przyszłości, do organizacji kształcenia wyższego w mniejszym zakresie lokalowego, powiązanego z konkretnymi budynkami i obciążeniami, kosztami właśnie nauki i szkolnictwa wyższego. No i wreszcie 10. punkt. Pojawiają się bardzo interesujące nowe tematy badawcze, to się bardzo rozwija, czyli w jaki sposób właśnie funkcjonować w tych relacjach online, relacjach zdalnych, hybrydowych, modelach, zarówno w edukacji, jak i w życiu społecznym. To wszystko dynamizuje właśnie rozwój nauki, pojawia się zupełnie nowa perspektywa, tak mi się wydaje. Ja zajmuję się metodologią, wobec tego również od strony metodologicznej widzę tutaj zupełnie nowy świat, nowe horyzonty, jak realizować badania w tych warunkach, w tych nowych warunkach, ale też myślę przyszłościowych. Serdecznie dziękuję za umożliwienie mi przedstawienia swojej wypowiedzi. Pozdrawiam serdecznie wszystkich uczestników kongresu i liczę na dyskusję, liczę na współpracę w przyszłości. Bardzo dziękuję za uwagę.